On April Fool's Day, I jokingly told my husband that I was having an affair. I expected a shocked silence or a heated argument. Instead, he let out a long, heavy sigh of relief. That is wonderful news, Alara. To be honest, I've been keeping something from you for a long time too. He had a smile of pure liberation on his face. It made my heart sink into my stomach. Since you found someone else, let's just call it even and end this cleanly. Your best friend, Shay, is pregnant with my baby. He leaned back, his eyes gleaming with a sick sort of joy. She's actually living in the unit right below us. Every time I told you I was working late, I was actually with her for her prenatal appointments. I felt guilty for so long. But now that you're stepping out too, my conscience is clear. I'm taking this house as compensation for your betrayal. He was lost in his own little fantasy. He didn't even notice that my expression had turned stone cold. That night, he didn't even bother pretending anymore. He told me he was going downstairs to sleep with Shay. I watched his retreating back and felt a chilling smile tug at my lips. Divorce would be too easy. I'd rather make his little joke a reality. He would never forget. A month later, my husband was on his knees, his eyes bloodshot as he begged me. Alara, I'm begging you. Please just sign the divorce papers and let me go. What's with that face? Tegan saw my silence, and his smirk grew even more arrogant. We're both adults here. You were the one who went out and found a boy toy first. It's only fair I keep the house as a settlement. He straightened his collar, his voice dripping with calculated greed. Besides, you've always been so dull and boring. You don't know how to say a sweet word. And you're like a cold fish in bed. Shay is much more attentive. She's gentle, sweet, and knows exactly how to please a man. Unlike you. Listening to his shameless words, my stomach churned with pure disgust. When did this start? I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. He shrugged as if it were nothing. About 2 years ago, right around the time your father passed away. 2 years. Those words hit me like a physical blow. My blood felt like it was turning to ice. Back then, my father had died suddenly. I had been a total wreck, unable to eat or sleep. I spent every day at the funeral home, crying until I had no strength left to stand. I thought Tegan was working long hours to help cover the costs and support our family. Instead, while I was drowning in grief, he was in bed with my best friend. You were so depressing to be around back then. Always moping. It was exhausting. He complained. Shay saw how stressed I was. She invited me over to her place to comfort me. And one thing led to another. He framed his infidelity as if he were the victim. I looked at this man I had shared a bed with for 5 years and felt like I was looking at a monster. He didn't care if I lived or died. He turned toward the door, slipping on his shoes. He was in such a hurry to get back to his little love nest downstairs that he couldn't stay another second. As his hand touched the doorknob, he paused and looked back at me. Oh, and remember to buy some organic chicken tomorrow. Make that slow-cooked broth you do and bring it down to Shay. Her morning sickness is terrible lately. She's lost so much weight because she can't keep anything down. That soup you made when I was in the hospital was great. I'm sure Shay will love it. The rage inside me finally erupted. When you were in the hospital? You mean after the car accident? I forced my voice to remain calm. He blinked, looking annoyed that I'd even brought it up. Yeah, whatever. That's in the past. Why bring it up now? Shay wanted some specialty pastries from the west side. I was in a rush to see her and took the turn too fast. Anyway, now that everything is out in the open, we can both move on. I hope you and your new guy are very happy. He confessed the truth without a hint of remorse, shattering the last bit of affection I had for him. The accident that almost killed him happened because he was catering to his mistress's cravings. The scars on my hands from preparing his meals while he recovered felt like a cruel joke. I stood there hollow and cold. I didn't even have the energy to scream. Before he walked out, he gave me one last order. Pack up my things in the study. Tomorrow I'm moving downstairs for good. So I don't disturb you and your little secret. My lawyer will send over the divorce papers soon. Sign them quickly so I can get Shay and the baby settled officially. The door slammed shut with a heavy thud. I was alone in the empty living room. I walked to the window and watched the lights flicker on in the apartment below. He thought he could just walk away after 2 years of betrayal. He thought he could steal my house and live happily ever after. In his dreams. Divorce? No. That was far too kind for people like them. Since he was so convinced I was cheating, I decided to make that April Fool's joke a reality. I was going to make them pay until they had nothing left. The next morning, the door burst open. Tegan was back to pack the rest of his gear, looking incredibly smug. I sat on the sofa. My eyes purposely rubbed red, to look like I've been crying all night. Are you really leaving me? My voice was raspy and I let a tear fall perfectly onto my hand. For 5 years I gave you everything. How am I supposed to live without you? He paused for a second, a look of pure mockery crossing his face. Stop the act, Alara. You've got your other guy now, don't you? He loosened his tie. We're over. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I buried my face in my hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I only said that because I was angry. There is no one else. I just wanted you to notice me. If you take the house, where will I go? You're leaving me with nothing. I wailed. Hearing that I hadn't actually cheated seemed to boost his ego even more. He looked down at me like I was a pathetic bug. Look, don't be like that. He sighed, acting magnanimous. Shay is a kind soul. She doesn't want you on the streets. I'll transfer the $30,000 from our savings to you. Consider it your severance pay from this marriage. To prove to Shay that he was a big man, he pulled out his phone and sent the money immediately. I kept my head down, hiding the cold smirk that was forming on my lips. The moment he hauled his last suitcase downstairs, my pathetic act vanished. I wiped my eyes and logged into his cloud account on my laptop. He was so convinced I was tech illiterate that he hadn't changed his password in 5 years. I downloaded everything, the disgusting texts, call logs and Shay's medical records. That afternoon, I printed the most scandalous photos and sent them to Shay's parents. They were old school, small-town folks who valued their reputation above all else. By the next day, screaming matches were erupting from the unit below. Shay's parents had taken the first flight into the city and forced their way into the apartment. You shameless brat. We raised you better than to be some man's side piece. I could hear the sound of slaps and Shay's hysterical crying through the vents. Pregnant and unmarried. You've humiliated this family. Her father bellowed. If you don't end this pregnancy immediately, don't you ever call us again. Tegan tried to protect her, but Shay's mother ended up scratching his face until it bled. Who do you think you are tricking our daughter into this? She screamed at Tegan. If you don't marry her properly and give us a massive financial settlement, we'll make sure everyone knows what a coward you are. While they were tearing each other apart, I poured myself a glass of expensive wine. Tegan was broke and desperate now, and he needed money to quiet her parents. Too bad for him, he didn't have a cent left. The day before, I had taken his credit cards to the high-end mall downtown. I bought designer bags, luxury skincare, and top-tier supplements to recover from the stress. By the time I was done, every single one of his accounts was maxed out. I blocked his number. As the notifications for over-limit spending started flooding his phone, he was being squeezed by Shay's parents for money he no longer had. The screaming downstairs reached a fever pitch just as my phone screen lit up with an incoming call. Tegan. I watched his name flash on the screen, the same name I used to whisper like a prayer when I thought he was the only good thing left in my life after my father died. Now the letters just looked like a disease. I let it ring out. I took a slow sip of the Barolo I had just opened, a $300 bottle bought entirely on his dime, and let the rich, dark liquid coat my throat. Through the floorboards, the muffled chaos of Shay's apartment continued. A heavy thud rattled the vents, followed by the unmistakable sound of Shay's mother shrieking, "A settlement! You promised us a settlement. Where is the ring, you deadbeat?" My phone lit up again. Then came the text messages, rapid fire, vibrating against the marble countertop. Alara, what did you do? Why are my cards declining? Answer the phone. I'm at my limit. He was trying to buy them off. He was trying to book them a luxury hotel, or maybe put a down payment on a diamond to prove he was the big, successful man he claimed to be. But the cards were dust. The limits were blown. And the $30,000 of savings he so generously gifted me as severance? It was already sitting safely in a newly minted offshore account under a Shell LLC my lawyer had set up that very morning. I set my phone to do not disturb and walked to the kitchen island. Tegan had given me an order, hadn't he? Make that slow-cooked broth and bring it down to Shay. I pulled out my father's old cast-iron pot. I didn't have organic chicken, but I did have time. The next morning, the building was eerily quiet. Shay's parents had presumably stormed out to a cheap motel, refusing to sleep under the roof of their daughter's disgrace. Tegan's car was parked haphazardly on the street, a parking ticket already flapping under the windshield wiper. I walked down the exterior stairs carrying a pristine, glass Tupperware container. It was heavy. I knocked on Shay's door. Tegan answered. He looked like he had aged 5 years in a single night. The arrogant smirk from yesterday was entirely gone. A jagged, angry scratch ran down his left cheek, courtesy of his future mother-in-law. His shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes darted to my hands. Alara, he breathed, his voice a mix of desperation and fury. What the hell is going on with the bank? I tried to buy groceries this morning and you asked for the broth. I interrupted, my voice perfectly smooth, perfectly hollow. I held out the Tupperware. He stared at me, disoriented by my calm. Behind him, Shay appeared in the hallway. She looked awful. Her roots were showing, her eyes were puffy, and the sweet, gentle facade Tegan claimed to love so much was replaced by a hard, venomous scowl. Get her away from here, Tegan. Shay snapped, wrapping her silk robe tight around her waist. I don't want anything from her. It's not soup, I said softly. Tegan frowned, looking down at the glass container. Inside, resting on a bed of dry, uncooked rice, was a thick stack of folded legal documents. What is this? He demanded, snatching the container from my hands. He popped the lid and pulled out the papers. As his eyes scanned the bold headers, the little color left in his face drained away entirely. It's a 30-day notice to vacate, I explained, offering a polite chilling smile. For this unit. Are you insane? Tegan barked, stepping forward. You can't evict us. We are married. Half of everything is mine, including this building. If anything, I'm forcing you out of the upstairs unit. My lawyer is drafting the papers today. Your lawyer, I corrected gently, is going to be very disappointed when he pulls the county records. You see, Tegan, you were so busy playing house in the hospital 2 years ago, you never paid attention to probate. My father didn't leave this duplex to me. He left it to an irrevocable trust. I am merely the sole beneficiary. I watched his jaw slacken. I let the reality wash over him. My name is nowhere on the deed and neither is yours. I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. This building was never marital property. You don't own the walls, you don't own the roof, and you certainly don't own this downstairs apartment. Shay's lease expired 3 months ago. She is currently a month-to-month tenant. And as the executor of the trust, I am terminating the lease. You have 30 days to get your pregnant mistress off my property. You lying bitch, Tegan hissed, lunging forward. I didn't flinch. I'd be careful. I installed Ring cameras on the landing yesterday. Assaulting a landlord won't help your custody case. He froze, his eyes darting to the corner of the ceiling where the small black lens blinked back at him. Shay let out a sharp, hysterical sob from the hallway. Tegan, she wailed. You told me you owned this place. You told my parents you were keeping the house. I will fix this, baby, I promise, Tegan stammered, turning back to her. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the show. I turned my back on them and walked calmly up the stairs, the sound of their ensuing screaming match serving as a lovely morning soundtrack. But I was far from finished. Financial ruin and homelessness were just the appetizers. Tegan had stolen 2 years of my life. He had violated my grief. I wanted the marrow from his bones. Over the next week, I became a ghost in my own apartment. I spent hours sitting at the mahogany desk in the study, surrounded by the terabytes of data I had pulled from his cloud account. Tegan was a mid-level acquisitions manager at a commercial real estate firm. He made good money, but not enough to support a wife, a mistress, expensive pastries from the west side, and a secret downstairs apartment. I had always wondered how he managed it. As I dug through his digitized receipts, cross-referencing them with his company's public expense policies, the answer became glaringly obvious. Tegan was a thief. Every time he took Shay to a luxury resort for a baby moon weekend, he expensed it under the guise of site scouting and client entertainment. The dinners, the spa treatments, even the prenatal appointments, he had cleverly buried the charges within large corporate travel budgets, forging signatures from fictitious clients. It amounted to over $60,000 in corporate fraud. I didn't hire a lawyer to handle this. I didn't need to. I compiled a meticulously organized PDF dossier containing every forged receipt, matched perfectly with the dates and timestamps of his romantic text messages to Shay. I sent the dossier to his firm's chief financial officer, the head of human resources, and the corporate compliance hotline. I routed it through an encrypted, untraceable email server, signing it simply as a concerned auditor. The fallout was instantaneous. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I heard the unmistakable sound of Tegan's car speeding into the driveway. Through the blinds, I watched him stumble out of the driver's seat. He wasn't carrying his usual leather briefcase. He was carrying a cardboard banker's box. He had been fired. And knowing corporate policy on embezzlement, they hadn't just fired him. They were likely preparing to sue him or press charges. Downstairs, the front door slammed so hard the floorboards trembled. They fired me. Tegan's voice tore through the drywall, thick with panic. Shay, they escorted me out with security. Someone tipped them off. What do you mean they fired you? Shay's voice pitched into a shrill screech. My parents are coming back next week. We have to put down a deposit for the wedding venue. We have to pay the hospital bills. I don't have it. Tegan roared, a sound of absolute despair. The accounts are frozen. Alara took the savings, the credit cards are maxed, and the company is holding my final paycheck pending a legal review. I have nothing, Shay. Nothing. Then what good are you? She screamed back. I sat in my armchair, sipping black coffee, letting the warmth of the mug seep into my cold, scarred hands. The hands that had washed his clothes, cooked his meals, and spoon-fed him when he crashed his car rushing to his whore. The symphony of their misery was intoxicating. The sweet, gentle Shay he had traded me for was revealing her true nature. A parasite panicking because the host was dying. Which brings us to a month later. The 30 days were almost up. Tomorrow was their eviction date. The downstairs apartment had become a war zone. From what I could hear, Shay had stopped sleeping in the same bed as him. She spent her days crying on the phone to her mother, while Tegan paced the floors like a trapped animal. I was reading a book when the knock came at my door. It wasn't the aggressive, entitled pounding from a month ago. It was a weak, pathetic tapping. I opened the door. Tegan was on his knees. His eyes were entirely bloodshot, surrounded by deep, bruised bags. He had lost weight, his cheeks hollowed out, his clothes hanging off his frame. The arrogant, calculated greed that had dripped from his voice that first night was completely gone. He looked up at me, a broken, empty shell of a man. Alara, he begged, his voice cracking. I'm begging you. Please. Just sign the divorce papers and let me go. I stared down at him. I remembered his smirk from a month ago. What's with that face? You were the one who went out and found a boy toy first. Stand up, Tegan, I said coldly. You're getting grease on my runner. He scrambled to his feet, pulling a crumpled manila envelope from his jacket. Please. I'll give you everything. Just sign them. Why the rush? I asked, leaning against the doorframe, projecting absolute boredom. A month ago, you told me your lawyer would send them over so you could get Shay settled. You seemed perfectly in control. Tegan swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically. Shay's parents. They gave her an ultimatum. If we aren't legally married by the end of the week, they are cutting her off completely. And she says she's going to leave me, Alara. She says she'll terminate the pregnancy and go back to her hometown. I can't lose the baby. I've lost my job, my reputation, my savings. I can't lose my kid too. I looked at him, dissecting his pain like a biologist examining a specimen on a slide. He didn't love Shay. He didn't even love the baby. He was just terrified of being left with absolutely nothing. He was clinging to this miserable, broken relationship because it was the only thing standing between him and total oblivion. And how exactly does my signature fix your life? I asked. I have a 401k, he blurted out. It's the only thing the company couldn't touch. There's about $150,000 in it. But because we're married, the brokerage placed a freeze on withdrawals during the separation. Period. If you sign the uncontested divorce decree, I can cash it out. I can pay Shay's parents. I can get us a new apartment. Please, Alara. I'm begging you. I slowly reached out and took the envelope from his trembling hands. I pulled out the papers. He had drafted an absolute surrender. He asked for zero alimony, zero equity in the house, nothing. He just wanted it finalized immediately. You want to cash out your retirement to pay off your mistress's parents. I mused, scanning the document. How romantic. Please, he whispered, a tear actually escaping his eye. I know I hurt you. I know I was a monster. But you won. You ruined me. Haven't you had enough? Revenge. I looked up from the papers, my expression freezing into stone. Revenge. I said quietly, Tegan, this isn't revenge. This is exactly what you asked for. You wanted a clean break. You wanted to call it even. I walked back into my apartment, leaving the door open. He hovered at the threshold, too terrified to step inside. I grabbed a pen from my desk, brought the papers back to the doorway, and pressed them against the wall. I'll sign them, I said. Tegan let out a massive, shuddering breath of relief. Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you, Alara. On one condition, I added, pausing the pen an inch from the paper. He froze. Anything. The 401k is a marital asset, I said softly, acquired during our 5 years of marriage. Since I am generously waiving my right to drag this through a 2-year discovery process, which, given your recent termination for fraud, you absolutely cannot afford, I want it. Tegan's eyes went wide. What? No. Alara, no. That's all I have left. It's the only way Shay will stay with me. It's the only way I can pay the rent next week. Then I guess we go to trial, I said, capping the pen and handing the papers back to him. Have your lawyer call mine. I'm sure in 18 months, the judge will be very sympathetic to the man who cheated on his grieving wife, blew their savings, and embezzled from his employer. You can't do this, he screamed, his voice breaking into a hysterical pitch. You already took the 30 grand. You maxed my cards. You own the building. You don't need the money. I don't, I agreed easily. But I don't want you to have it. So make your Choice Tegan. Sign over the 401k in a revised addendum right now, or stay married to me while Shay packs her bags and walks out that door downstairs. He stared at me, his chest heaving, his face contorted in a mask of pure agony. He was cornered. There was no escape, no clever manipulation, no lie he could tell to get out of this. He had built his own cage, and I had simply locked the door. I'll draft the addendum, he whispered, his voice completely dead. It took 30 minutes. He wrote it out by hand on the kitchen counter, his hand shaking so badly he could barely form the letters. He signed over 100% of his retirement accounts, his only remaining vehicle, and waived any right to contest. I signed the divorce decree, making him a free man. A completely destitute, utterly destroyed free man. He snatched the finalized decree from the counter and ran. He didn't even say goodbye. He just sprinted down the stairs, desperate to show Shay the paper, desperate to prove to her that he was finally free to marry her. I walked over to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to watch the driveway. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Suddenly, the downstairs door flew open. But it wasn't Tegan who walked out. It was Shay. She was carrying 2 massive suitcases, dragging them over the concrete. Following closely behind her was a sleek, black town car that had just pulled up to the curb. Her parents were in the back seat. Tegan stumbled out of the house after her, waving the divorce papers frantically in the air. Shay, wait. Look, I'm divorced. We can get married. I'm free, he was shouting, his voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. Shay stopped at the trunk of the car. She turned to look at him, her face a mask of utter contempt. You're a loser, Tegan, she spat, her voice cutting through the crisp afternoon air. You have no job. You have no house. You have no money. Do you really think I'm going to raise a child in a homeless shelter with you? But we love each other. Tegan cried, reaching for her arm. You said I was better than Alara. You said you wanted a life with me. Shay ripped her arm away. I wanted a life with the man who paid for my apartment and bought me jewelry. Not a broke criminal who just signed away his last dollar to his ex-wife. I did that for you, he screamed, dropping to his knees on the concrete, the divorce papers fluttering from his hands and landing in a muddy puddle by the curb. No, you did it because you're stupid, Shay replied coldly. She handed her bags to the driver, climbed into the back seat, and slammed the door without a second glance. The town car pulled away, leaving Tegan kneeling in the driveway, clutching his chest as he wailed. It was a pathetic, wretched sound, a man mourning the death of his own illusions. He had thrown away a woman who loved him unconditionally, for a woman who only loved what he could buy her. And now he had nothing to buy her with. I watched him kneel in the dirt for a long time. The setting sun cast long, cold shadows over the driveway. I felt no pity. I felt no sorrow. I didn't even feel angry anymore. The cancer had been excised. The wound was clean. I let the curtain fall back into place, plunging the apartment into quiet darkness. I walked to the kitchen, poured the remaining Barolo down the sink, and started packing my things. The trust had already accepted a cash offer for the duplex from a corporate developer. They were going to bulldoze the place next month to build a parking garage. It was a fitting end, I thought. There was nothing left here but dirt, and tomorrow I would be entirely gone.